Hi, Maggie. Thank you for coming and welcome to the show.
Hey, Lauren. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
And we are thrilled to have you here. Like I was telling you earlier, I have been watching your videos all morning. I feel like I need to stop everything and start investing. So thank you so much for being here. So tell me about your background in financial planning and how you got here.
Yeah, so I really am passionate about money management and just getting really good with money because I grew up on the poorer side of things and just, more in that lack and struggle. And I really, really wanted to get to a point where I could make decisions out of a want versus what can I afford. So that sent me down the path of finding out what jobs actually pay good money. That led me to finance, which led me to really become passionate about it because I was like, okay, I'm learning this and I'm also helping others along the way get really good with their money and figure out what to do with their money that they've accumulated. So after working at the big brokerage firms, I started to see that people didn't really get attention from financial advisors like myself, like I was at that time, unless you had hundreds of thousands of dollars to invest. And so that really got me thinking about starting my own business where you could get help and learn how to invest regardless of how much money you actually had to invest. Even if you have $10 or $100 or something, you can just get started with the foundational principles and start to put your money to work when you can afford it versus waiting till you accumulate hundreds of thousands to actually walk into a big brokerage firm and work with a traditional financial advisor. So that's what really led me to start Money with Maggie and why I'm just like so passionate about helping people that don't have that typical access because it is game changing when you get really good with your money and you can make those decisions, like I said, out of want instead of just necessity.
Totally. Because I find financial planning to be really, really intimidating. Like it's one of those things where it's like, if you talk about taxes with me or financial planning or investing or anything, I just like start to fall into my shell and go, I don't know what to do. So I think it's really amazing that you just kind of grabbed this topic by the horns and just went for it. So when it comes to investing, and you mentioned this in a couple of your videos, and you just mentioned it now, you can start with something like $10. Where should we put that $10? And is there a recommended place to do it, or does it really depend on your situation?
It very much depends on your situation. But what I tell beginners that are actually ready to start investing, and how you know this, I think, is if you've got that high interest debt paid off, if you've got a bit of an emergency fund saved up, and you've got your short-term goals covered. So anything that you need in the next couple of years, then once you're there, you can then start to put a percentage of your money into an investment. It can be something as simple as a few index funds. Warren Buffett says, just put it in the S&P 500. If you are unsure and overwhelmed, because statistically speaking, money managers, people that are choosing and hand selecting different investments, they don't tend to outperform the simple S&P 500, which is just a basket of America's 500 largest companies. So the names that you and I know and use on an everyday basis, those are what we can invest in a simple, very affordable index fund because they've just packaged those and made it really easy for us to buy that. If you're not at that point where you've got that kind of foundation and you're ready to invest on a regular basis, I still say you can start with $10 or $100 for educational purposes. So as you are working to pay down your debt, let's say you take $100 and you divide that up, you can take 80% and put that into a few index funds. So you can get like the S&P 500, you can get a small cap fund, and you can get an international fund. And you could just Google international index fund and just pick one. And then you can pick a couple of stocks and put 20%. Maybe you get 2 stocks and you get Amazon because you shop on Amazon, and you get Apple because you use Apple products. So you can just take that $100, 80% in the funds, 20% in a couple of stocks, and just simply let it be and learn. Watch how the stocks move, watch how the funds move, pretend that it's $1,000 or it's $100,000, and mentally do that math. If you, after 6 months are up 10%, you could say, okay, if this was $1,000, I would be up $100. And that just allows you to get much more comfortable with the movement of money in investments while you're working on those things like paying down your debt and saving up an emergency fund.
Totally. So you said something that I think is really interesting, which is lean into the learning of it, the education of it. And another thing that I picked up from one of your videos is the emotional journey that goes along with that and why the learning is so important. But what are we looking for while we're learning? Like, what are the key things that I should walk away from when I'm using this $100 and then eventually feeling more comfortable and adding a couple of zeros to the end of it?
The key thing is really how to manage your emotions when you're investing, because the number one reason individual investors do not do well managing their own money, meaning they're picking stocks and funds on their own and they're not working with a financial advisor. So that group of people, the reason that they don't do well is because they let their emotions guide them versus creating a plan and sticking to it and following it. And an easy way to look at this and understand this is to Google the emotional side of investing and then click on images and you'll see some charts. These look like roller coasters and it'll show you what you're just naturally going to feel when the markets are up and when they're down. When you sell when the market's down, it can be devastating for your long-term gains because markets turn around really quickly and we don't know when that happens. And if we lose those big upsides, that can really set us back in our long-term success of our portfolio. So that is what we're trying to learn when we're investing that first $100 and really trying to get comfortable. You just say, oh, the market's down 10% like it is currently right now. And see that it comes back. It's normal for it to fall. It's normal for it to go up. So the more you get used to knowing that it's normal, then when you have hundreds of thousands of dollars invested, you don't freak out or any amount. When you first invest your first $1,000 that you've worked really hard to save, that can be really freaky when it starts to drop. When that $1,000 turns to $800, you could panic. And that's what you do not want to do when you're investing on your own.
Okay, cool. So I heard it's really getting along with the flow, getting comfortable with our feelings because they're going to fluctuate and they're out of our control at that point, and being comfortable with the movement of the market. And so what, I know it's individualized and everybody's goals are different, but what are some common things that people should really be planning for? Let's say with a low risk tolerance. So, retirement, any sort of family planning, I want to buy a house. What's the best way to start building a plan for that and actually start to see those results come through?
So with the low risk tolerance, meaning you either don't have time to recover from large market losses, or you don't have the income or the nerves to recover from these losses, then you have to invest in more conservative things like bonds, CDs, or just keeping your money in cash. And with these types of investments, you really aren't going to keep up with inflation. You're just not going to see a lot of growth. So it is difficult to invest for shorter term goals. And typically that's anything under 5 years, under 10 years. But it doesn't mean you can't. It's just you have to be aware of the risks associated. Like we bought our house that I live in right now and we used a down payment. We pulled money from our investment portfolio to put the down payment on our house. But the market was up and it was just great timing. If the market was down when we wanted to buy, maybe we would have delayed buying. Maybe we would have bought something smaller, a smaller down payment. But the market was up. We had plenty of gains. We decided to just take some of our gains and use it on our down payment. So that's where being flexible with the time frame of your goal, if you're investing for your goals. But if you have something specific that you want by a specific time, that might not be money that you invest in the stock market, but maybe into bonds or something more conservative, but you're really not going to get a lot.
Okay. And speaking of, having a higher risk tolerance, let's talk about some of the things that I can't seem to get my eyes off of because they're just trending everywhere, like Bitcoin, crypto, NFTs. What's the deal with that? Like, should that even be a part of our financial plan? Or is that something that really anybody with a little extra cash should be investing into?
I like to think of those. I personally don't have any. I don't like to go into the trendy things. But if you are someone that really is interested in it and I do believe that blockchain is going to be in the future, cryptocurrency might be in the future, but at the same time, I like to go for those more certain investments versus taking bets. Because when you get into something like cryptocurrency, it doesn't have this long history of performance. And also there's actually not even anything for it to perform. It's a currency versus like a product that people buy and sell. It would be like investing in the dollar, which some people do invest in the dollar. But I think carve out a small percentage and just stick to that. So if you, like we were talking about earlier, if you go 80% index funds, 20% stocks, maybe of that 20%, you take 5% or less, maybe 3%, and get it into something more risky, like cryptocurrency, marijuana stocks, pot stocks, that type of thing that you hear about. That can be a smaller portion of your overall portfolio. So you're dabbling in it and you're also learning, but you're not betting your future on it. So that's kind of how I think to think about those things.
Yeah. And it's a sigh of relief knowing that you don't have any, because naturally for me, I'm like, it's too hairy and scary. Like you said, there's not a lot of, previous history for me to look back on. And that leads me to another point, which is how can I measure what a good stock looks like, or a good bond or ETF or any of those things besides looking at the S&P 500 ones? Let's say I see one that seems really interesting for whatever reason. What's a good way to measure whether or not it's good for me?
Well, first I like to ask if I use the product myself, if I have it around my house, if my friends and family use it. So that's kind of like the first rule of thumb, because there's a lot of people that will message me and ask me like, hey, I heard about this stock. What do you think about it? And I've never heard about it. They haven't even heard about it, except one of their buddies told them about it. So that type of investing is more like the gambling, like things you're unsure of, you don't really know anything about. So you can fit that in that smaller percentage of your portfolio if you're really interested in it. But I like to just get into stuff you already know, because you're already spending money on it. So that way, when we have times like financial crises and pandemics, we know, are we still buying this product or using this service? And if we're still spending money on it, it's a higher chance that that company is going to be profitable and have profits, because we can see it every day when we're with our own dollars that we spend. So we're much more likely to have profits and understand the profits, where the money's coming from and the growth. And so that's kind of what I think you should let guide you when you're trying to pick what a good stock is.
It's almost like you should be emotionally invested, pun intended, with the product or service that you're buying into before you get financially invested. So I like that answer a lot. Okay. So investing, I feel better about. Now let's talk about budgeting. How can I feel good about setting a budget and making sure that it's a healthy one, that I'm not starving myself, that I'm not, have so much money lying around that I should be investing it? What's a good formula or framework to use to know that you're actually saving the right amount versus investing?
Yeah. So the reason I think a lot of budgets fail is because it's really easy for us to write everything down, all of our expenses, all of our income, and see what we think we're spending. So the big problem with that is we spend so much money on things we don't plan to spend on, we don't even know exist yet, because Instagram just shows it to us and we buy it. And Guilty. So there's a lot of that unaccounted spending that happens to everyone. So in order to really have a successful budget and be able to carve some money out for investing, you have to take some time and go through your past spending to really face the numbers. And people do not want to do this work, but I've done it. I did it when I really started getting serious about my finances. I just sat down, I went through my bank statements, I categorized my spending, and I really got real with the numbers. Like, where is my money actually going? Because then you can, as you look through that list, there's going to be some things that pop out at you that just make your heart sink, that you're like, oh my God, that was such a waste of money. Why did I spend that much money on that category? And then there's going to be areas where you're like, oh man, I wish I could spend more in this area, or that was like a great purchase. So when you look at the numbers and you let those help you figure out where your money should go in the future, you won't feel that much of a sacrifice. You won't feel like you're depriving yourself, because really you're just curbing your spending from one area that doesn't actually bring you as much joy as you think on the day to day, and directing it towards areas that can be more impactful, that can bring you more long-term satisfaction, and that can really make you feel like you're accomplished in achieving your goals as you see those dollars add up in your bank account.
Okay, brilliant. I like it. We got to face the music, get real with ourselves, and then just start allocating funds other places and moving it around and stretching it a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, so I lied. I do have another investment question that popped up. So let's say I've set a goal that I want to sell this stock at a certain number. How do I know what number that is without feeling guilty that maybe the stock is just going to keep rising the next day or et cetera? What's a healthy way to measure when a good time to sell is?
Okay, I think to really determine that, you want to revisit the original thought. Am I still using this product? Is it still a big part of my life? And I like to do this once a year. So you make your decisions of what you're going to own, you buy those, and then once a year, review those. So I carve out the last 2 weeks in December, sometime, maybe even the last week. And I look at all of my investments, and I don't like to hold a lot because then it makes this review process really long and difficult.
Right.
So we have maybe 6 stocks, and we have 3 types of funds, but I like to just keep it small because then your money can be more impactful. There's the idea of concentration builds wealth while diversification maintains wealth. So I like to get concentrated on some investments. Anyways, going back to your question, how do you know when to sell your stock? So every year when I'm doing this review process, I look at the 5 or 6, 7 stocks that we own. And then I ask myself, are we still using this? Is this still a big part of our future? Do we see any competitors coming up that are overtaking this space? And let that recommit you to the stock for the next year. And then just decide this every single year going forward. So it can be really hard because you mentioned getting emotionally involved with your stock, thinking emotionally about your stock. You don't want to get so emotionally attached to your stock that it's done so well for you that you don't want to sell it. Because you do have to say, is this actually going anywhere? Maybe it's seen its growth. Maybe it's time to switch to something else.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I like how you said it's an annual check-in. I think it's really nice. I like routine, and I also like, having things to look forward to and deadlines. So I think that makes sense. And it's nice to know that it's once a year, not me just checking my E-Trade account every single day and making an emotional decision. Okay, cool. So that sounds really good. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see individuals making when it comes to investing, budgeting, or any sort of financial planning?
So with investing, definitely paralysis by analysis, spending so much time reviewing all the options, trying to find the best thing. There is no best thing. It changes from year to year. Yeah. What was best last year is not going to be best this year. And there's no certainty in what's going to be the best. So just getting invested, let that be enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can change it. It'll evolve. You might be in something that has a high fee associated. Well, next year, make a change to that. Get something in a lower fee. So don't get so caught up in just looking for the best next thing that you just waste all of your time, because time in the market is so much more than timing the market. So the longer you're in the market, the more likely you're going to have success in growing your portfolio over time. So that's number 1, just that paralysis by analysis. Number 2 is buying way too many stocks, taking your money and spreading it out way too thin because you want a part of everything. Well, in that case, you're just not going to have enough money invested into any one single thing to have real growth. Another big mistake I see is people waiting to invest. There's just this constant waiting, like, I'm going to do it later. I'm going to do this first. You've got to get started. From talking to so many wealthy clients, I used to always ask them, is there anything you would do differently with your portfolio? And the main thing everyone said, even people that had millions of dollars, they would say, I just wish I started sooner. Seeing how much my account has grown, if I would have started sooner, wasted less money, I could have even more. Everyone always wants to have more. Right. But getting started, even if it's just a little bit, so that you can get that momentum and that habit formed, and then add more to it when you can afford more.
Amazing. Okay. So I get it from an individual standpoint. What happens now when we're in a relationship, we're building a family, it's moved into family financial planning, and you're building it with a partner? What are some goals or some things that people should incorporate into their family financial plan?
Well, I always tell people to make sure your retirement is taken care of first. When people start family planning, everyone wants to set up accounts for their kids and plan for their college. That's nice, of course. But if you're not well established with your own finances, taking care of your kids, you're going to leave the burden of them taking care of you in retirement versus just giving them the gift of being self-sufficient in retirement. And as a grown adult, you want to really have a good sense of your own finances. So make sure that you and your partner have run your numbers. How much are you saving for retirement? How much are you saving for your shorter term goals? And then after you've got, say, you can put away 15% of your income every single paycheck, and you're just doing that on autopilot, you've got some extra money, then you can start to say, okay, what can we do for our kids? Do we want to finance their education? Do we not want to? You don't have to pay for your kids' education. You can, but maybe you don't want to. So have those conversations of how much or how, if you even want to, and then look into some good options. 529s are great for saving for college because your kids can pull that money out income tax free versus regular investing accounts, a custodial account, for example. When they pull that money out, you have to pay tax on the growth or the gains of the account. So if you've been investing for 15 years for your kids, there's going to be a lot of gains in there, and that money is going to go partially towards taxes. But if you had put that in a 529, you save all that tax money if they use it for college. But you also can invest in a custodial account for them. Maybe it's for a down payment for their car or their first apartment or something like that. So you can open up a custodial account, and other relatives can gift money to your kids. So we all know most people have too many things, and especially children. There's just too many toys, too much stuff. Totally. So if you just tell your relatives hey, why don't you gift them $20 of stock or something like that, that can really benefit their future long-term and not clutter up your house.
What an interesting idea. And I love that idea because you're right. And I have a 2.5-year-old son, and I step on a Lego every 20 minutes. So I love what you're saying. And this is going to sound like a really silly question, but can you buy a 2.5-year-old kid stock and it's legally theirs? Or is that something that is held till they're 18? How does that even work?
You can, and it would be in a custodial account. So when you open up a custodial account, it is your kid's money, but you're the custodian.
Sure.
So that money is just in their name. When they do become 18 or 21, depending on the state you live in, then that account has to go to the kid. So that's something you want to think about. If you have any worry that your kid is just going to take all the money and go to Tahiti or something,
right?
That's going to be something you have to talk to them about.
Right.
Because it will legally be theirs. They have to change it when they become an adult. But with the 529, that money is supposed to go for college. So did I answer the question?
You sure did, and more. And I've asked you so many, and we don't have to go any further because I feel like I'm just ringing you of everything. But
no,
thank
that's
you
okay.
so much.
Totally good. We're totally good. I was just wait, did I? Sometimes I give too much information.
I know. Well, and I heard COVID brain is real. I know people that had COVID literally last year, and they're my brain is not the same. By the way, we could edit this part out, but it's to your point. You're doing great. You're so sharp. Other than that, is there anything else that you think, especially fiancés, who we're really practiced with, anything that they should be looking into as they enter a marriage and are starting to build a life with somebody else that isn't just their own anymore?
Well, definitely talk about money, talk about your finances, ask each other how much debt you have, how much money do you have saved? What's your spending like? Some of these conversations people don't even have until they're already married or well into their relationship. Ask it early on. Ask these questions early on, because when we hear statistics of money and finance being a large contributor to divorce and problems in marriage, why not take the extra time to set yourself up to have a really strong financial foundation with your partner? If that means you two save extra before you get married, you delay getting married, you live in a cheap place. My husband and I had him move in with me. I had a $100,000 home. It was $950 a month. And I had him move in with me so that I could save up more money, because at that time, I really didn't have much. I was still in debt and I didn't have money to my name. And he's 6 years older than me. He was further along in his finances. So he had more savings. But I was like, I have to get some money in the bank. I've got to get this taken care of. So you can move into my place. We can pay super cheap rent and just keep our bills really low and then just bank all that extra money. So that's what we did for a year before we moved into a nicer place together and increased our expenses. So I really encourage people to talk about it, be transparent with each other, create financial goals, because then it'll help eliminate or reduce a lot of that tension with individual spending in the future, because you'll be on the same page of like, okay, these are our priorities. This is the kind of life we want to build. We want to take these kinds of vacations and we don't want to stress and argue about money. So the only way I think to do that is to just be transparent, open, honest, and be real with each other.
Amen. Thank you so much for joining us today, Maggie. You are amazing, and I could talk to you for literally ever.
Thank you so much for having me. I love the work that you're doing. It's just so great to really help people as they're preparing for this big life transition. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing in the world.
Oh, of course. And where can people find more of you or get in touch with you if they want to work with you for their financial planning?
Yeah, so moneywithmaggie.com is my website. I'm on Instagram, YouTube, everywhere as Money with Maggie. And I have an online course coming out. It's going to be my third launch that I'm opening up at the end of March. So I would love if anyone's interested in learning the foundational things to really start investing successfully. You can check that out. If you're catching this, after my next launch, just jump on the wait list and I'll keep you updated for the future launches that I have. I also have a 4 steps to invest downloadable guide that walks you through what accounts to use, what investments to buy, how to set your investing budget. It's really thoughtfully created to really help you take those first initial steps and get moving with your investing so that you can set yourself up for long-term wealth building. So you can grab that from my website, moneywithmaggie.com.